The desert air hangs still and cool tonight, carrying the faint scent of sage and the distant whisper of sand shifting across ancient stone. Here, at the Dreamwave Motel, where the highway stretches endlessly toward horizons painted in starlight, we find ourselves at the crossroads of the ordinary and the extraordinary. The neon sign hums softly outside your window, casting gentle blues and pinks across weathered asphalt, while somewhere in the darkness, a coyote calls to the infinite sky above. You've come to this place where stories settle like dust on old furniture, where travelers have shared their tales for generations. Tonight, as you sink deeper into comfort and the world grows quiet around you, we'll explore one such story together. The desert has always been a keeper of secrets, a vast canvas where the impossible seems just within reach. It was July 8, 1947, when the world first heard the name Roswell, New Mexico. The morning sun was already climbing high over the high desert plains, promising another scorching day in the land of enchantment. Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer at the nearby Roswell Army Airfield, was about to become part of a story that would echo through decades. But our tale begins earlier, on a stormy night in early July, when rancher Mac Brazel discovered something unusual scattered across his property. You can imagine the vast expanse of the Foster Ranch, 75 miles northwest of Roswell, where the earth stretches unbroken toward distant mesas. The landscape here is painted in subtle browns and greens, dotted with scrub brush and the occasional juniper. It's a place where silence has weight, where the only sounds are wind through dry grass and the distant lowing of cattle. Mac Brazel had worked this land for years, understanding its moods and rhythms like an old friend. On that fateful evening in early July, thunderheads had gathered on the horizon, promising relief from the relentless heat. Lightning flickered across the darkening sky as Brazel made his rounds, checking on his sheep and cattle. The storm, when it arrived, brought with it torrential rain and hail, the kind of weather that can reshape the desert landscape in a single night. By morning, the air was cool and clean, washed fresh by the passing storm. It was during his next inspection of the ranch that Brazel allegedly discovered debris scattered across a wide area. According to his later accounts, the material was unlike anything he had encountered in his years working the high desert. He described pieces of metal that seemed impossibly light, some bearing strange markings that caught the morning light in peculiar ways. The debris field, as he would later tell authorities, stretched for hundreds of yards across the scrubland. Brazel collected some of the unusual material, loading it into his pickup truck, with the methodical care of someone accustomed to strange findings on the range. The desert, after all, was full of surprises. Military aircraft from the nearby base occasionally dropped practice bombs or test equipment. Weather balloons were not uncommon. But this material, he would later claim, felt different somehow, both familiar and utterly foreign at the same time. For several days, the debris remained in Brazel's possession as he pondered what to do. The ranch was isolated, miles from the nearest telephone, and the practical demands of ranch life took precedence over mysterious findings. It wasn't until he made his regular trip to Corona, New Mexico, that he learned of the military's interest in unusual aircraft sightings. The newspapers had been full of stories about flying saucers, strange objects seen in skies across the nation. Encouraged by the bartender and patrons at a local establishment, Brazel decided to report his findings to the sheriff in Roswell. Sheriff George Wilcox, a practical man accustomed to the usual complaints and discoveries of ranch life, listened with interest to Brazel's description. The debris, Brazel explained, was scattered across his property like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Some pieces were metallic, others resembled a kind of paper or fabric that wouldn't burn or tear. Sheriff Wilcox, recognizing the potential military significance of the find, contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. The base, home to the 509th Composite Group, was no ordinary military installation. This was the unit that had dropped the atomic bombs on Japan just 2 years earlier, the most elite and secretive bomber group in the world. The officers at Roswell were accustomed to handling sensitive materials and unusual situations. Major Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, was dispatched to investigate. Marcel, a decorated veteran with experience in military intelligence, approached the situation with professional curiosity. The drive to the Foster Ranch took him through miles of high desert, past mesas and arroyos carved by centuries of wind and water. As he traveled, the landscape gradually shifted from the developed areas around Roswell to the vast emptiness of the open range. When Marcel arrived at the debris field, he found Brazel waiting with samples of the unusual material. According to Marcel's later accounts, what he saw that day challenged his understanding of known technology. He described metal that was incredibly light yet impossible to dent or damage, despite his best efforts with hammers and other tools. Some pieces bore markings that resembled hieroglyphics, symbols that seemed to shift and change in the desert light. Marcel collected as much of the debris as possible, loading it carefully into his military vehicle. The material, he would later claim, filled the back of his car completely, yet weighed surprisingly little. As the sun climbed higher over the desert, casting sharp shadows across the scrubland, Marcel made the decision to transport the material back to the base for further analysis. But first, he made an unusual stop at his home in Roswell. At his house on 1405 West 7th Street, Marcel allegedly showed some of the debris to his wife and 11-year-old son, Jesse Marcel Jr. The boy, who would grow up to become a medical doctor and military officer himself, later described handling pieces of the material. He spoke of symbols that seemed almost familiar, yet completely foreign, etched into metal that felt warm to the touch, despite the cool morning air. The family examined the debris in their living room, turning pieces over in their hands, trying to understand what they were seeing. Young Jesse Jr. would later recall the texture of the material, describing it as smoother than silk, yet stronger than steel. He spoke of attempting to fold or bend the metal fragments, only to watch them spring back to their original shape, with an almost magical resilience. The symbols, he claimed, reminded him of hieroglyphics he had seen in school books, yet they seemed to possess a depth and complexity that suggested something far more sophisticated. After the family examination, Marcel transported the debris to the Roswell Army Airfield, where it was presumably subjected to more rigorous analysis. The base, with its sophisticated laboratories and experienced personnel, was well equipped to examine unusual materials. However, what happened to the debris after it arrived at the base remains one of the central mysteries of the Roswell incident. Official records from this period are sparse, and many documents that might shed light on the investigation have never been released to the public. Meanwhile, the story was beginning to take on a life of its own. On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Daily Record published a story that would make headlines around the world. The article, based on an official press release from the base, stated that the military had recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell. The story was picked up by news services and newspapers across the nation, creating a sensation that reached from coast to coast. The press release had been authorized by Colonel William Blanchard, the commanding officer of the 509th Composite Group. Blanchard, a serious military officer with a distinguished record, was not known for sensationalism or practical jokes. His decision to release the information suggests that he and his staff believed they had indeed recovered something unusual, something worthy of public attention. The precise wording of the release described the object as a flying disc, terminology that aligned with the popular reports of unidentified flying objects that had been appearing in newspapers throughout the summer. However, the story took a dramatic turn within hours of its publication. General Roger Ramey, the commanding officer at Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas, held a press conference that same day. At this conference, Ramey displayed what he claimed was the actual debris recovered from the ranch. The material he showed to reporters appeared to be the remains of a weather balloon, complete with metallic foil, wooden sticks, and rubber components. Ramey explained that the Roswell personnel had misidentified the debris and that there was nothing mysterious about the recovery. Major Marcel was present at this press conference, photographed kneeling beside the weather balloon debris. In later interviews, Marcel would claim that the material displayed at Fort Worth was not the same as what he had recovered from the ranch. He alleged that the real debris had been switched, replaced with conventional weather balloon components to deflect public attention. According to Marcel, the actual material was far more unusual and technologically advanced than anything he had seen in his military career. The weather balloon explanation was accepted by most of the press and public at the time. The story quickly faded from national attention, relegated to the status of a minor military mistake. For the residents of Roswell, life returned to its normal rhythm of ranching, farming, and the daily routines of a small New Mexico town. The desert reclaimed its secrets, and the unusual events of early July seemed destined to become nothing more than a footnote in local history. However, the story did not disappear entirely. In the years that followed, researchers and investigators began to interview the participants in the events, collecting testimony and documentation that painted a more complex picture. Mac Brazel, the rancher who first discovered the debris, gave several interviews over the years, though his accounts sometimes varied in detail. He described the material as unlike anything he had encountered in his years of ranch work, but he also expressed frustration with the attention the incident had brought to his quiet life. Brazel's neighbors and friends in the Corona and Roswell areas provided additional context for the events. Some recalled seeing unusual lights in the sky during the early days of July 1947. Others reported increased military activity in the area, with personnel from the base conducting what appeared to be search and recovery operations across the high desert. These accounts, collected decades after the fact, provide glimpses into the broader context of the incident. The military personnel involved in the recovery also became subjects of intense interest. Major Marcel, in particular, became a central figure in later investigations of the incident. In interviews conducted in the 1970s and 1980s, Marcel provided detailed accounts of his involvement in the recovery operation. He described the debris as exhibiting properties that seemed to defy conventional physics, materials that were simultaneously incredibly strong and impossibly light. Marcel's credentials and character became important factors in evaluating his testimony. As an intelligence officer with the 509th Composite Group, he had been entrusted with some of the military's most sensitive operations. His colleagues described him as a competent and reliable officer, not given to flights of fancy or exaggeration. This reputation lent credibility to his later claims about the unusual nature of the recovered material. Other military personnel from the base also provided testimony about the incident. Some described unusual security measures that were implemented in the days following the recovery. Others spoke of aircraft arriving from other bases to transport materials and personnel. These accounts suggested that the incident had implications that extended far beyond the borders of New Mexico, involving military installations and personnel across the country. The broader context of 1947 is important for understanding the Roswell incident. This was the beginning of the Cold War, a time when national security concerns were paramount. The military was actively developing new technologies and weapons systems, often under conditions of extreme secrecy. The high desert of New Mexico was home to numerous classified projects, from atomic weapons testing to experimental aircraft development. In this environment, unusual incidents were often subject to classification and security restrictions. The summer of 1947 was also the beginning of what would become known as the modern UFO era. reports of unusual aerial phenomena were appearing in newspapers across the nation, describing objects that seemed to defy conventional aircraft capabilities. The military was actively investigating these reports, trying to determine whether they represented new technologies developed by foreign powers or simply represented misidentifications of conventional aircraft and natural phenomena. Project Blue Book, the military's official investigation of UFO reports, would eventually examine thousands of cases over the course of more than 2 decades. However, the Roswell Incident predated the establishment of Blue Book, occurring during a period when the military's response to such reports was less systematic and coordinated. This timing may have contributed to the confusion and conflicting accounts that characterize the incident. As the years passed, the Roswell Incident gradually gained attention from researchers and writers interested in the UFO phenomenon. Books and articles began to appear, examining the evidence and interviewing the participants. These investigations revealed a complex web of testimony and documentation that suggested the incident might have been more significant than the official weather balloon explanation indicated. The town of Roswell itself began to embrace its connection to the incident, particularly as it became apparent that the story had commercial potential. Museums, festivals, and tourist attractions began to appear, capitalizing on the public's fascination with the mystery. The desert town that had once been known primarily for its agricultural and military connections became synonymous with one of the most famous UFO incidents in history. However, skeptical researchers also examined the evidence, pointing out inconsistencies and problems with witness testimony. They noted that many of the key interviews were conducted decades after the fact, when memories might have been influenced by media accounts and popular culture. The lack of physical evidence and the absence of contemporary documentation were also cited as significant weaknesses in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The debate over Roswell has continued for decades, with believers and skeptics offering competing explanations for the events of July 1947. Some researchers have suggested that the incident involved classified military projects, possibly related to the development of new aircraft or surveillance technologies. Others have proposed that the debris was indeed from extraterrestrial sources, representing humanity's first recovery of alien technology. The military's own investigations have provided additional context for the incident. In the 1990s, the Air Force released a report titled The Roswell Report: Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert, which examined the historical record of the incident. According to this report, the debris was most likely from a classified project known as Project Mogul, which used high-altitude balloons to monitor Soviet nuclear testing. Project Mogul involved the launch of trains of balloons carrying sensitive acoustic equipment designed to detect the signature of nuclear explosions. These balloon trains were classified at the highest levels, and personnel involved in the project were sworn to secrecy. The materials used in these balloons included some unusual components, including radar-reflecting foil and strong, lightweight structural elements. The classified nature of the project could explain why the initial weather balloon explanation was offered instead of a more detailed account. However, critics of the Project Mogul explanation have pointed out inconsistencies between the described balloon components and the testimony of witnesses like Major Marcel. They argue that an experienced intelligence officer would have been able to recognize balloon debris, even if it was from a classified project. The unusual properties described by Marcel and others, they contend, are not consistent with any known balloon technology of the era. The children and family members of the original witnesses have also become part of the ongoing discussion. Who handled the debris as a boy maintained throughout his life that the material was unlike anything of terrestrial origin. He described the symbols and markings in detail, even attempting to reproduce them in drawings and interviews. His testimony, as someone who had direct physical contact with the debris, has been considered particularly significant by researchers. Other family members and friends of the witnesses have provided additional accounts of the incident. Some described seeing the debris before it was taken to the military base. Others recalled conversations with family members who were involved in the recovery operation. These secondary accounts, while not as direct as first-hand testimony, provide additional layers of context and corroboration for the various aspects of the story. The cultural impact of the Roswell incident has been enormous, influencing everything from science fiction to popular music. The story has been retold countless times in books, movies, and television shows, often with embellishments and dramatic license that have obscured the original accounts. This cultural phenomenon has made it more difficult to separate fact from fiction, as later witnesses may have been influenced by popular depictions of the incident. As you consider these various accounts and explanations, lying here in the quiet comfort of your room, you might reflect on the nature of mystery itself. The desert outside your window has witnessed countless events over the millennia, some recorded in history, others lost to time and memory. The Roswell incident, whether it involved extraterrestrial visitors or classified military projects, represents humanity's endless fascination with the unknown. The high desert of New Mexico continues to be a place of scientific research and military activity. The clear skies and remote locations make it ideal for astronomical observations and weapons testing. The same factors that may have attracted attention in 1947 continue to draw researchers and military personnel to the region today. In this landscape of infinite horizons and star-filled nights, the boundary between the possible and impossible seems uniquely thin. Mac Brazel lived out his days on the ranch, continuing to work the land that had made him famous. He rarely spoke publicly about the incident in later years, perhaps weary of the attention it had brought to his quiet life. His neighbors remember him as a practical man, someone who was more comfortable with cattle and sheep than with reporters and researchers. The desert kept its secrets, and so did he. Major Marcel continued his military career, serving with distinction in various capacities. He never wavered in his assertion that the material he recovered was unlike anything in the known inventory of terrestrial technology. His conviction, maintained consistently over decades, adds weight to his testimony in the minds of many researchers. The photographs of him with the weather balloon debris at Fort Worth, he insisted, did not show the same material he had collected from the ranch. The other military personnel involved in the incident followed various paths after their service. Some spoke openly about their experiences in later years, while others maintained their silence. The culture of military secrecy, particularly regarding classified projects, created an environment where many stories were never fully told. The desert wind carries whispers of these untold tales, accounts that may never see the light of day. The scientific community has generally remained skeptical of extraterrestrial explanations for the Roswell incident, citing the lack of physical evidence and the problems with witness testimony. However, the incident has also sparked legitimate scientific interest in the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, continues to scan the skies for signals from other civilizations, driven partly by the same curiosity that makes the Roswell story compelling. Astronomers and physicists have calculated the enormous distances between stars and the energy requirements for interstellar travel. These calculations suggest that visits from extraterrestrial civilizations would be extraordinarily difficult and expensive, making such visits unlikely unless they served very important purposes. However, the same scientists acknowledge that civilizations with technology far in advance of our own might have capabilities we cannot currently imagine. The psychological aspects of the Roswell incident are also fascinating to consider. The human tendency to see patterns and meaning in ambiguous events can lead to interpretations that go far beyond the available evidence. The desire to believe in something greater than ourselves, to find evidence that we are not alone in the universe, can influence how we interpret unusual events. These psychological factors don't invalidate witness testimony, but they do provide important context for understanding it. The sociology of belief and disbelief surrounding Roswell reflects broader patterns in how societies deal with unexplained phenomena. Communities often develop shared narratives about significant events, and these narratives can become deeply embedded in local culture and identity. Roswell, New Mexico, has certainly experienced this phenomenon, with the incident becoming an integral part of the town's identity and economy. As the decades have passed, new technologies have emerged that might shed light on the original incident. Advanced materials, science has developed substances with properties that would have seemed impossible in 1947. Memory metals, carbon fiber composites, and other synthetic materials exhibit some of the characteristics described by witnesses. However, these materials were not available in 1947, raising questions about the origin of the debris. The government's approach to UFO investigations has also evolved significantly since 1947. Recent years have seen official acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, with military and intelligence agencies releasing videos and reports of objects exhibiting flight characteristics beyond current known technology. This new openness represents a significant shift from the secrecy and denial that characterized official responses for decades. Declassified documents from various government agencies have provided additional context for understanding the incident. While no smoking gun has emerged definitively proving extraterrestrial involvement, the documents do reveal the extent of government interest in UFO reports during the Cold War era. The concern about foreign technology and the need to maintain security around classified projects created an environment where unusual incidents were often shrouded in secrecy. The international context of UFO reports also provides perspective on the Roswell incident. Similar stories of unusual crashes and recoveries have emerged from other countries, suggesting that the phenomenon, whatever its nature, is not limited to the United States. These international cases provide additional data points for researchers trying to understand the broader picture of unexplained aerial phenomena. The evolution of technology and our understanding of physics has also influenced how we interpret the Roswell incident. Concepts that seemed impossible in 1947, such as metamaterials with unusual electromagnetic properties, are now subjects of serious scientific research. The description of debris that exhibited unusual properties might be more credible today than it was decades ago. Given our expanded understanding of what is possible, the witnesses to the Roswell incident, those who are still living and those who have passed away, represent a link to a moment in history when the impossible seemed to touch the everyday world of a small New Mexico town. Their accounts, whether accurate or influenced by time and retelling, preserve a human connection to events that continue to fascinate and perplex. As you rest here in the desert night, you might consider the courage it took for these individuals to share their stories. Knowing they would face skepticism and ridicule, the landscape around Roswell remains much as it was in 1947, vast and open under endless skies. The ranch where Mac Brazel made his discovery continues to operate, though it is now under different ownership. The land remembers, in its way, holding the imprints of that summer, when something unusual allegedly fell from the sky. Visitors to the area often comment on the sense of possibility that seems to permeate the high desert, a feeling that anything might be possible under such immense skies. The scientific instruments that now study the cosmos from observatories around the world are far more sophisticated than anything available in 1947. Radio telescopes and optical instruments scan the heavens continuously, searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence or unusual phenomena. The data they collect provides a growing understanding of the universe and our place within it, though the question of whether we are alone remains unanswered. The children and grandchildren of the original witnesses have become custodians of their families' stories, preserving accounts that might otherwise be lost to time. These younger generations, raised with the stories of their elders, provide continuity and perspective on events that occurred before their birth. Their commitment to preserving these accounts ensures that the human dimension of the Roswell incident will not be forgotten. The military installations in New Mexico continue to be centers of advanced research and development. The technology developed at these facilities pushes the boundaries of what is possible, creating capabilities that would have seemed like science fiction in 1947. The same innovative spirit that drives this research may also provide clues to understanding the events of that summer long ago. As you drift towards sleep, surrounded by the profound quiet of the desert night, you might reflect on the enduring appeal of the Roswell story. Whether it represents contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, a classified military project gone awry, or simply a case of mistaken identity, it speaks to fundamental human desires to explore, to understand, and to believe in possibilities beyond our current knowledge. The stars above the desert shine with the same light that illuminated the events of July 1947. Some of these stars have planets, and some of those planets might harbor life. The universe is vast beyond imagination, filled with billions of galaxies and countless worlds. In such an immense cosmos, the possibility of other intelligent life seems not just plausible, but probable. The desert wind whispers across the landscape, carrying with it the accumulated stories of countless years. Native American traditions speak of star people and sky beings, accounts that predate the modern UFO era by centuries. These older stories provide cultural context for understanding how different societies have interpreted unusual phenomena throughout history. The technology we use today, from satellite communications to computer networks, would have seemed magical to observers in 1947. This rapid pace of technological advancement suggests that civilizations with longer histories of development might possess capabilities that would appear supernatural to us. The materials and technologies described by Roswell witnesses might represent examples of such advanced capabilities. The investigation of the Roswell incident has also contributed to the development of research methodologies for examining unusual phenomena. The techniques used to evaluate witness testimony, analyze physical evidence, and assess the credibility of accounts have applications beyond UFO research. These methods help researchers in many fields separate reliable information from speculation and misinterpretation. The economic impact of the Roswell story on the local community demonstrates how unusual events can become part of a region's identity and livelihood. The museums, festivals, and tourist attractions that have grown up around the incident provide employment and bring visitors from around the world to this small New Mexico town. The story has become a renewable resource, generating interest and revenue decades after the original events. The philosophical implications of the Roswell incident extend beyond questions of extraterrestrial visitation. The story raises issues about the nature of truth, the reliability of memory, and the social construction of belief. These questions are relevant to many areas of human experience, from legal proceedings to historical research to scientific investigation. Educational institutions have used the Roswell incident as a case study for teaching critical thinking skills. Students learn to evaluate evidence, consider alternative explanations, and distinguish between correlation and causation. The complex web of testimony, documentation, and physical evidence provides an excellent example of how real-world mysteries resist simple explanations. The media coverage of the Roswell incident has evolved significantly over the decades, reflecting changing attitudes toward UFO phenomena and government secrecy. Early coverage was often dismissive or sensationalistic, while more recent reporting has attempted to present balanced examinations of the evidence. This evolution mirrors broader changes in journalism and society's approach to unexplained phenomena. The international UFO research community has made the Roswell incident a cornerstone of their investigations. Researchers from around the world have contributed to the analysis of the evidence, bringing diverse perspectives and methodologies to bear on the mystery. This global collaboration has enriched our understanding of the incident and its implications. As the night deepens around you, the desert settles into its ancient rhythms of cooling and silence. Somewhere in the darkness, small creatures move through their nocturnal routines, adapted to this harsh but beautiful environment. The ecosystem of the high desert has persisted for thousands of years, testament to the resilience and adaptability of life in challenging conditions. The military personnel who were stationed at Roswell Army Airfield in 1947 have largely passed into history, their stories preserved in interviews and documents. Their service during World War II and the early Cold War era represents a pivotal period in human history, when technology and global politics were reshaping civilization. The Roswell Incident occurred during this time of rapid change and uncertainty. The ranching families of the region, including the Brazells and their neighbors, represented a way of life that was already changing in 1947. The modernization of agriculture and the growth of military installations were transforming the rural Southwest. The Roswell Incident occurred at the intersection of this old world and new world, adding an element of mystery to an already complex period of transition. The scientific understanding of materials and physics has advanced enormously since 1947, providing new contexts for interpreting the witness descriptions of unusual debris. Metamaterials, quantum effects, and nanotechnology have revealed possibilities that were not imagined decades ago. These advances don't prove the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but they do expand the range of what might be considered possible. The psychological studies of witness testimony and memory have also provided insights relevant to the Roswell case. Research has shown that memories can be influenced by suggestion, cultural context, and the passage of time. However, this research has also revealed that some types of memories, particularly those associated with strong emotional events, can be remarkably persistent and accurate. The development of computer modeling and analysis techniques has allowed researchers to examine the Roswell evidence in new ways. Weather patterns, military flight records, and witness locations can be analyzed with precision that was impossible in earlier decades. These technical approaches complement traditional research methods and provide additional tools for understanding the incident. The space program that began in the 1950s has provided humanity with unprecedented views of Earth and the cosmos. The images and data collected by satellites and space probes have expanded our understanding of the universe and our place within it. This cosmic perspective adds context to discussions of possible extraterrestrial visitation, making such possibilities seem both more plausible and more significant. The Cold War context of the Roswell incident cannot be overstated. The fear of Soviet technological advances, the secrecy surrounding atomic weapons, and the general atmosphere of suspicion and security concerns all influenced how unusual events were handled. The military's response to the incident must be understood within this historical framework. The cultural impact of the Roswell story extends far beyond UFO research. The incident has influenced art, literature, music, and popular culture in countless ways. This cultural dimension has become part of the story itself, shaping how new generations understand and interpret the original events. The Native American presence in the Roswell area provides additional cultural context for understanding the incident. Traditional stories and beliefs about sky beings and star people offer alternative frameworks for interpreting unusual phenomena. These perspectives, while often overlooked in mainstream discussions, add depth and richness to the cultural landscape surrounding the incident. The environmental history of the region also provides context for the events of 1947. The high desert ecosystem, the weather patterns, and the geological formations all influenced how events unfolded and how evidence was preserved or lost. Understanding this environmental context helps researchers interpret witness accounts and physical evidence. The legal and governmental frameworks that existed in 1947 shaped how the incident was handled and documented. Military regulations, security classifications, and federal jurisdictional issues all influenced the official response. Changes in these frameworks over the decades have affected how the incident has been investigated and understood. As you rest here in the gentle embrace of night, consider the enduring human fascination with mystery and the unknown. The Roswell Incident, whatever its ultimate explanation, speaks to our deep-seated desire to explore, to question, and to imagine possibilities beyond our current understanding. This impulse has driven human civilization forward, from the first tools to the exploration of space. The technological capabilities that exist today, from global communications to genetic engineering, would have seemed impossible to observers in 1947. This rapid pace of change suggests that our descendants, looking back from the vantage point of 2047 or 2147, may have perspectives on the Roswell incident that we cannot currently imagine. Time and technological advancement often reveal truths that were hidden to earlier generations. The scientific method, with its emphasis on empirical evidence and reproducible results, provides the best framework we have for understanding unusual phenomena. However, science also teaches us humility, acknowledging that our current understanding is incomplete and subject to revision as new evidence emerges. The Roswell incident challenges us to maintain this balance between skepticism and openness. The social and psychological factors that influence belief and disbelief are as important as the physical evidence in understanding the Roswell story. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures, inclined to find meaning and significance in ambiguous events. This tendency can lead to both profound insights and significant errors in interpretation. The preservation of historical records and testimony becomes increasingly important as the original witnesses pass away. The interviews, documents, and artifacts associated with the Roswell incident represent a finite resource that must be carefully maintained for future researchers. These materials are the threads from which any ultimate understanding of the events must be woven. The international dimension of UFO phenomena provides a broader context for understanding the Roswell incident. Similar events have been reported from around the world, suggesting that whatever underlies these reports is not limited to any single culture or region. This global perspective enriches our understanding while also complicating simple explanations. The military and intelligence agencies that were involved in the original incident have evolved significantly over the decades. Declassification procedures, freedom of information laws, and changing attitudes toward transparency have altered how such incidents might be handled today. These institutional changes provide new opportunities for understanding historical events. The economic and social impact of the Roswell story on the local community demonstrates how historical events can take on lives of their own, becoming economic and cultural resources that persist long after the original events. This phenomenon is not unique to Roswell, but represents a broader pattern of how communities adapt to and capitalize on their connections to significant historical events. The educational value of the Roswell incident extends beyond its specific historical significance. The case provides an excellent example of how complex events resist simple explanations, how evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways, and how cultural and psychological factors influence our understanding of ambiguous phenomena. These lessons have applications far beyond UFO research. The media treatment of the Roswell incident over the decades reflects changing attitudes toward authority, secrecy, and unusual phenomena. The evolution from dismissive coverage to serious investigation to commercial exploitation illustrates broader changes in American society and media culture. This media history is itself part of the Roswell story. As the night air grows cooler around you, carrying the scent of sage and the distant sounds of the desert. You might reflect on the passage of time and the persistence of mystery. The events of July 1947 are now part of history, separated from us by decades of technological and social change. Yet the questions they raise remain as compelling today as they were then. The men and women who experienced the Roswell incident firsthand have largely passed into memory, their stories preserved in interviews and documents. Their perspectives, shaped by the culture and knowledge of their time, provide a window into a moment when the impossible seemed to touch the everyday world. These human accounts, with all their complexities and contradictions, are at the heart of the enduring mystery. The landscape where the events occurred remains largely unchanged, the high desert preserving its secrets under endless skies. The Foster Ranch continues to operate, the military base has been transformed but continues its mission, and the town of Roswell has embraced its role as a keeper of mysteries. These places hold the memory of that summer when something unusual allegedly fell from the sky. The scientific and technological advances that have occurred since 1947 provide new tools for understanding unusual phenomena, but they also reveal the limitations of our current knowledge. Each new discovery in physics, materials science, and astronomy opens new possibilities while also highlighting how much we still don't understand about the universe and our place within it. The cultural legacy of the Roswell incident extends far beyond the UFO community, influencing how we think about government secrecy, the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and the nature of evidence and belief. These themes resonate through contemporary discussions of many issues, from climate change to medical research to political transparency. The international community of researchers who have studied the Roswell incident represents a diverse group of individuals united by curiosity and a desire to understand unusual phenomena. Their work, whether supportive of extraterrestrial explanations or more conventional alternatives, contributes to our broader understanding of how societies deal with ambiguous and challenging events. As you settle deeper into rest, surrounded by the profound quiet of the desert night, you might consider the role of mystery in human experience. The unknown has always been a source of both fear and fascination, driving us to explore, to question, and to imagine possibilities beyond our current understanding. The Roswell incident, whatever its ultimate explanation, represents this fundamental aspect of human nature. The story of Roswell is ultimately a human story, about people trying to understand unusual events within the context of their time and culture. McBrazel discovering strange debris on his ranch, Major Marcel examining materials that defied his understanding, military personnel grappling with implications beyond their experience, and families preserving stories across generations. These human elements give the incident its enduring power and significance. The desert wind continues its ancient patterns, carrying with it the accumulated stories of countless years. The same stars that witnessed the events of 1947 continue to shine above, eternal witnesses to the small dramas that unfold on the surface of our planet. In this vast cosmic context, human stories take on both greater significance and appropriate humility. As sleep approaches and the boundaries between waking and dreaming begin to blur, you might find yourself reflecting on the nature of truth and the limits of knowledge. The Roswell incident, like many historical mysteries, may never be fully resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Perhaps the value lies not in finding definitive answers, but in the questions themselves and the search for understanding they inspire. The morning will bring new light to the desert landscape, illuminating familiar forms and casting new shadows. The mystery of what happened in the summer of 1947 will persist, carried forward by new generations of researchers and curious minds. The search for answers continues, driven by the same human impulse that has always pushed us to explore beyond the horizons of our current understanding. The technological marvels that surround us today, from the device you might be listening to this story on, to the satellites that enable global communication, represent achievements that would have seemed impossible to many observers in 1947. This rapid pace of technological development suggests that our descendants may possess tools and knowledge that will shed new light on historical mysteries that perplex us today. The scientific exploration of space has revealed a universe far stranger and more wonderful than anyone imagined in 1947. We now know of planets orbiting other stars, of water on Mars, of organic molecules in the depths of space. These discoveries have not answered the question of whether we are alone in the universe, but they have made the possibility of other life seem increasingly plausible. The military and intelligence agencies that were involved in the original incident have undergone significant changes in the decades since 1947. Declassification procedures, congressional oversight, and changing public attitudes toward government secrecy have created new opportunities for historical research. Documents that were once classified beyond any hope of release have become available to researchers and the public. The psychological and sociological factors that influence how we interpret unusual events remain as relevant today as they were in 1947. Our tendency to see patterns in ambiguous information, to be influenced by cultural expectations, and to remember events in ways that conform to our beliefs continues to shape how we understand not just historical mysteries, but contemporary events as well. The environmental context of the high desert continues to influence how we understand the events of 1947. The clear skies that made the region attractive for military testing also created ideal conditions for observing unusual phenomena. The sparse population meant that unusual events might go unwitnessed, while the vast distances could make verification and investigation challenging. The Native American communities of the Southwest possess traditional knowledge and perspectives that predate the modern UFO era by centuries. Their stories of sky beings and star people provide cultural context that is often overlooked in mainstream discussions of the Roswell Incident. These alternative frameworks for understanding unusual phenomena add depth and richness to our consideration of the events. The ranching families who have worked the land around Roswell for generations possess intimate knowledge of the high desert environment. Their understanding of weather patterns, natural phenomena, and the usual debris that might be scattered by storms provides important context for evaluating claims about unusual materials. This local knowledge is invaluable for understanding what would and would not be considered normal in the environment where the incident occurred. The military personnel who served at Roswell Army Airfield represented some of the most elite and experienced members of the armed forces. Their training in handling classified materials and unusual situations makes their testimony particularly significant. These individuals were accustomed to maintaining secrecy about sensitive operations, which adds weight to their later decisions to speak publicly about their experiences. As the night deepens around you and the desert settles into its ancient quiet, you might reflect on the persistence of wonder in human experience. Despite all our technological achievements and scientific understanding, we remain capable of being amazed by the unknown and the unexplained. This capacity for wonder is one of our most valuable characteristics, driving us to continue exploring and questioning. The children and grandchildren of the original witnesses carry forward not just specific memories, but also the broader legacy of curiosity and inquiry that the incident represents. Their commitment to preserving and sharing these stories ensures that future generations will have access to the human dimension of historical events, not just the official records and documentation. The international community of researchers who have studied the Roswell Incident brings diverse perspectives and methodologies to the investigation. Scientists, historians, journalists, and amateur investigators from around the world have contributed to our understanding of the events. This global collaboration represents one of the positive aspects of the modern world's interconnectedness. The commercial and cultural industry that has grown up around the Roswell story demonstrates how historical events can be transformed into ongoing cultural resources. While commercialization sometimes distorts historical accuracy, it also ensures that stories are preserved and passed on to new generations. The challenge lies in maintaining a balance between commercial appeal and historical integrity. The legal and governmental frameworks that existed in 1947 created an environment where unusual incidents were often classified and removed from public scrutiny. The national security concerns of the early Cold War era meant that many events were handled with extreme secrecy. Understanding these historical contexts is essential for interpreting the official responses to the incident. The educational institutions that have used the Roswell incident as a case study have contributed to our understanding of how complex events can be analyzed and interpreted. Students learning to evaluate evidence, consider multiple hypotheses, and distinguish between reliable and unreliable sources gain valuable skills that extend far beyond the specific case study. These educational applications ensure that the incident continues to serve constructive purposes. The media coverage of the Roswell incident has evolved from initial dismissal to serious investigation to cultural phenomenon. This evolution reflects broader changes in journalism, popular culture, and public attitudes toward unusual phenomena. The media history of the incident is itself an important part of the story, influencing how subsequent generations have understood and interpreted the events. The space program that began in the 1950s was partly motivated by the same curiosity about the unknown that makes the Roswell story compelling. The achievements of space exploration, from the moon landings to the exploration of Mars, represent humanity's ongoing effort to understand our place in the cosmos. These achievements provide context for considering the possibility of other intelligent life in the universe. The technological capabilities that exist today for detecting and analyzing unusual phenomena are far beyond what was available in 1947. Radar systems, satellite networks, and sophisticated analytical instruments provide new tools for investigating unusual events. However, these same capabilities also make it more difficult for truly unusual phenomena to remain undetected or unanalyzed. The philosophical implications of the Roswell incident extend beyond questions of extraterrestrial visitation to broader issues about the nature of reality, knowledge, and belief. The incident challenges us to consider how we evaluate evidence, how we distinguish between the possible and the probable, and how we maintain appropriate levels of skepticism while remaining open to new possibilities. As you rest here in the profound quiet of the desert night, surrounded by the vast expanse of star-filled sky, you might consider your own relationship to mystery and the unknown. Each of us carries within us the same capacity for wonder that has driven human exploration and discovery throughout history. The questions raised by the Roswell incident are ultimately questions about our place in the universe and our willingness to consider possibilities beyond our current understanding. The morning sun will rise again over the high desert, as it has for millions of years before humans walked this land, and as it will for millions of years after we are gone. The landscape will continue to hold its secrets, some of which may never be fully understood. In this cosmic context, human stories take on both profound significance and appropriate humility. The search for truth continues, driven by the same curiosity and determination that led McBrazel to report his unusual discovery, Major Marcel to investigate the debris, and countless researchers to examine the evidence in the decades since. Whether the ultimate explanation involves extraterrestrial visitors, classified military projects, or more conventional phenomena, the search itself reflects the best aspects of human nature. The legacy of the Roswell incident extends beyond any specific conclusions about what happened in July 1947. The incident has inspired countless individuals to question official explanations, to seek evidence for their beliefs, and to remain open to possibilities that challenge conventional understanding. These are valuable qualities in any society, regardless of their application to any particular mystery. The story continues to evolve as new information becomes available and new perspectives are brought to bear on the evidence. Future researchers may have access to documents, technologies, and analytical methods that are not currently available. The questions raised by the Roswell incident may eventually be answered definitively, or they may remain mysteries that continue to inspire curiosity and investigation. The human dimension of the story, the personal accounts and family memories that have been preserved over the decades, represents an irreplaceable resource for understanding not just the specific events, but also the broader context of how societies deal with unusual phenomena. These personal stories remind us that behind every historical event are real people trying to make sense of their experiences. The desert wind carries with it the accumulated stories of generations, tales of ranchers and soldiers, of families and communities, of mystery and wonder. Some of these stories will be preserved for future generations, while others will fade into the vast silence of the high plains. The Roswell incident has earned its place among the stories that persist, continuing to fascinate and perplex new generations of listeners. As sleep takes hold and your consciousness drifts toward dreams, you might find yourself carried across the vast expanse of the high desert, where endless skies meet ancient Earth under the eternal watch of distant stars. In this landscape of infinite possibility, the boundary between the known and unknown becomes beautifully, mysteriously thin. The story of Roswell, like the desert night itself, invites contemplation and wonder. Whether it represents humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, a classified military experiment, or simply a case of mistaken identity, it speaks to our deepest desires to explore, to understand, and to believe in possibilities beyond our current knowledge. In the gentle embrace of sleep, surrounded by the profound quiet of the high desert night, let the mystery of Roswell carry you toward peaceful dreams. The questions it raises about our place in the universe, the nature of evidence and belief, and the persistence of wonder in human experience will be there when you wake, as they have been for decades, waiting patiently for new generations of curious minds to consider them anew. Rest well, traveler, here at the crossroads of the ordinary and extraordinary, where the desert holds its secrets and the stars shine down with the same light that witnessed the events of that distant summer. The morning will bring new light to familiar mysteries, and the search for understanding will continue, as it always has, driven by the eternal human desire to know what lies beyond the horizons of our current understanding. Sleep now, and let the gentle desert wind carry your dreams across landscapes of possibility, where the known and unknown meet under skies filled with infinite stars.